Welcome to Vote Home, the podcast series that wants you to have a choice on 9th of June 2024. My name is Narcis Matache, and together with Zoe Nicot, we'll be hosting the lead candidates from hopefully every political party in Denmark standing for the European Parliament elections.
Over the next 60 minutes, you'll get to know our guest for today, its political standing, relationship with the international community in Denmark, and view of the future of the EU. Knowledge of the EU, identity questions, and stay tuned because we'll have a fun challenge for our guests at the end.
And our guest today is Marie Peter-Hansen from the group of Greens European Free Alliance party, or more easily said, the SF, the Socialist Party in Denmark. Thank you so much, Kira, for joining us here and for wishing to talk to our audience. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
So I guess I will let my colleague Zoe to start the first part, which will be about the candidate.
Excellent. Well, first, I would like to know just a little bit about your background and why did you decide to go into European politics, just very briefly.
Yes, so my name is Kira. I'm 26, and I've been a member of the European Parliament for the last 5 years, part of the leadership of the Greens EFA group, and been working mostly on economics, employment, and gender equality. And I was elected back in 2019. At that point, I didn't aim at getting elected, but I was running as a youth candidate. And in order to ensure that more young people would be engaged in the EU discussion. But then when the election night happened, our party got one extra seat, which was, of course, great. And that seat in the end went to me, and then I had to move to Brussels.
Amazing. Well, then you have already been in the European Parliament for the last 5 years, so you do really know what it's about. So then for the next elections, which you're standing for, it would be great to know a bit about what are some concrete projects that you want to fight for or invest your time in for the next coming 5 years, if it's up to you. Yeah.
Well, I would really like to engage in continuing the EU Green Deal that we got back in 2019. For the Greens EFA party, as it's stated in the name, the green issues has always been top of the agenda. And I think in the last 5 years, we've done quite a lot. But unfortunately, we see also now that the Liberal and Conservative parties wish to either hold or stop the EU Green Deal or even revert it back. So for me, the most important issue and the most important fight in the coming 5 years is to ensure that we still continue the green transition.
Well, that is going to be a very challenging fight with lots of opinions and lots of conflict in interest and also political standings. But definitely something to look out for. And this podcast is aimed at, of course, everyone voting for the elections, but also specifically internationals living in Denmark. And what would your appeal be to citizens living in Denmark that are not Danish citizens, but EU citizens? And why should they vote for a candidate in Denmark, for example, such as yourself or someone else?
Well, my appeal would be to vote. I think it's very important. Unfortunately, we see that the voter turnout at EU elections is not as high as it is at national elections, at least not in Denmark. And that means that fewer of us have an impact on the direction of our European project. I think if you don't know the Danish parties that well, I would look at the European parties or your national party and then find the sister party. So for SF, we're part of the Greens EFA group, are the Green Left Party in Denmark. So I think you can more or less reverse from what you're used to in your national, on your home country, to the European elections in Denmark.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's also it's actually smart when we have these political groups in the parliament where we can try to group the political parties from that are many and really very varying in Europe. And have you in your campaign, or even just in the last 5 years, what's been your kind of interactions with international voters? It could be in Denmark, it could also be elsewhere. And what's your relationship with them as a group? Something you're focusing on, or?
I would say so, yes. I was elected as the youngest MEP last time. So I've mostly been engaged with young Europeans from all over Europe who's either come to Brussels or Strasbourg and visited the parliament, or media and newspapers who's been writing about the young generation of Europe. So that's been my main interaction with the younger audience. And then, of course, I've tried to, as part of the Green Group, we see ourselves very much as Europeans and not as representatives of Denmark, of Germany, of Greece, to kind of have a look at what is our overall vision for Europe, acknowledging that we are facing the same obstacles and challenges, not necessarily in the same degree. For example, if we speak about youth unemployment or the refugee situation, it's more difficult in some places than in others, but it's the same challenges that we are structurally facing.
Yeah, so there's definitely some consensus about the big agendas that we can all relate to and discuss. That's very interesting. Then now I'd like to do something a little bit fun, to ask you a few yes and no questions. And they're quite different, but let's see what you think of these. So question, and you can just answer yes or no. Or if you want to elaborate, that's also okay, but you can also just say yes or no. Okay, so question 1 goes, should one be able to take the plane to travel from Aarhus to Copenhagen?
If what one should be able to what?
To take the plane to travel from Aarhus to Copenhagen. So yeah, should there be a plane transport option?
Well, there is today, but ideally there shouldn't be. It's quite a short distance. It should be able to be done by train, but that of course also entails that our trains need to be quicker and cheaper and more convenient.
Okay, then question 2. Should EU countries stop selling arms to Israel?
In the ideal world, yes. I think now with Iran and the attack also in Israel, of course there is it's more complex because Israel also needs to defend itself against Iran, for example, but we shouldn't sell weapons to Israel with the aim of continuing the fight against Palestine. So it depends a bit what the weapons are used for.
Absolutely. Okay. Then question 3, should cannabis be legalized?
Yes.
That was an easy, clear yes. Okay, then should farmers pay a tax on their CO2 emissions?
Yes, they should. I think the agricultural sector should be part of either the European emission trading system, or in another way pay for their pollution. They're the only industry except the plane industry who doesn't pay, and it just means that the other industries need to pay more. What is also important for the Greens, however, is to ensure that it's actually also economically sustainable to be a farmer in Europe, which unfortunately is not the case today, as the main profit goes to the producers of pesticides or seeds.
Okay, very interesting. And that's also a very contested topic, not just in Denmark, but on the European level too. Okay, then my next question is, are there too many members of the European Parliament, and should we reduce the number of MEPs, in your opinion?
I would say no. Of course, we are a big parliament. I think the current size is okay. And then when we're looking towards the enlargement, now in the last agreement, we made some extra seats that we could free if the enlargement happens within the next 5 years. But I think that's overall fine. I think it's of course very difficult because you need to have, I think the minimum now is 6 members of the European Parliament for the smallest member states. And I don't think we can reduce that. But at the same time, it needs to respect the proportionality. So it needs to be balanced there.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, then I would like to know, are there any platforms, social media platforms that should be banned, or is there any forums online that should be banned in terms of security, privacy issues, different rights? If that's not too of a complex question.
The short answer is no. I think it doesn't work if we just ban specific platforms, for example TikTok, because then something else will just pop up. What I think we should do instead is to control very hard the algorithms. And here I think there's also consideration whether we should ban specific ways of doing algorithms. So for example, micro-targeting that we're banning in the Digital Service Act, or ensuring that you can only do algorithms that respect privacy, that doesn't radicalize the users of the platform. But I would focus on the technology instead of the platform.
Indeed. So we need to kind of have a regulatory framework in place, which we are starting to have now. Now it's a question of enforcement and implementation, which is will be very interesting for the next European Parliament and Commission to look at. Okay, then in a bit of a different direction, food preferences. Do you have like a specific diet? Are you like, do you only eat organic food or vegetarian, or do you eat everything?
I eat vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian since I was 8, so quite a long time now.
Okay.
And then I try to eat as much ecological food as possible, especially when it comes to dairy products.
Okay, interesting. And then last question is, should Denmark exit the European Union?
No, Denmark should stay.
Excellent. Then thank you so much for those yes or no questions. Narcis, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Zoe. It was interesting to hear the candidate's position on Denmark's exit. It's good to know that yet another candidate that visits our studio here says no, a resounding no to exiting the European Union. I guess everyone that has seen what happened with Brexit can understand why. But we will go forward to the second part, which is about the Union. And in the first question will be, I want you to reflect on a declaration made by Robert Schuman, one of our founding fathers. He said, "Europe will not be made all at once or according to a single plan. It will be built through concrete achievements which first create a de facto solidarity." Do you think that we have managed to achieve what our founding fathers and mothers envisioned for European Union? Or do you think that we're still far away from that dream, the first dream that we had as Europeans?
Well, I think we're continuously doing that, and I think that was also the point of Schuman, that we're not going to do it all at once, not even in 2024. It's going to be a continuously effort to build up solidarity. I think with the recent COVID crisis, that was one example of solidarity being strengthened among the EU countries, especially with the common financing of the recovery plans in the EU. That was one step towards the solidarity aspect of it. But of course, there is still a lot to do. But I'm hopeful, and I'm also quite confident that we will continue in that direction.
I'm not sure if you have heard of this club in the 70s called the Crocodile Club in the European Parliament. There was this guy called Altiero Spinelli, also one of our founding fathers. He has used the institution of European Parliament to try to push a faster change, because some of the national governments were not so keen or willing to make the progress of European Union forward. So I'm just wondering, you're one of the youngest MEPs ever, if not the youngest. Are you seeing yourself, or do you want to use the European Parliament institution to try to speed up a little bit the speed forward for the European Union?
Yes, I would say in short. Of course, we need to be aware that change is difficult for many people, and it needs to be done in a space, in a speed that people can also manage. But I think the overall goal would be to have a stronger European Union.
What is your dream for the future? I mean, what is the next step for our union?
Well, I think my biggest dream is to have a green union. So to have a European Union that's world leading when it comes to energy and environment and climate. Further than that, my wish would be that we see or that we strengthen the identity of being a European and acknowledging the common history and culture and values that we have, and move towards also a more social union. Like I think many of the things that Jacques Delors said was very right, and I think this is an aspect where we've, especially with the pillar of social rights, we've moved in that direction, but we're still quite far away when it comes to ensuring equality and social convergence in the European Union.
So basically, just to make it more in layman's terms, we're talking about having a unified pension system or some sort of a unified social security system on a European level?
Well, I'm also Danish, and I think the people who's been in Denmark for a longer time knows that we are not necessarily the fondest people of like so wide integration. I think the goal should be that we have the free movement of Europeans, and that entails also that we have a common framework for pensions and for social security. But also an important part of the Green Left SF's party is that we are also a very decentralized party. That a lot of decisions are being taken like in a better way if they're taken close to the people who are living with the aspects. So, for example, when it comes to the welfare system, I think it should still be the municipalities of Denmark who are deciding how are the schools being run or how is the hospitals being run. And of course there is a European dimension of that in order to ensure that we can have, for example, a healthcare system in Europe that is functional, and that we can have good welfare in all countries, and the European decisions impact those possibilities in the member states. But it should still be the people who are very close to the system that are also making the decisions.
I think also the pandemic has shown us how dangerous it can be to have so many, for example, public health systems, right? It was a complete chaos in the first weeks, first months of the pandemic in Europe. I remember I was actually in the parliament as well back then, and I could see the chaos that was ensuring, and the how many MEPs completely forgot that they are there to represent Europeans and switched very quickly to representing their national interest in the parliament, and that was a bit terrifying to see back then. So that's why I believe that if we move at least on certain aspects, like for example public health, towards a more, if not unified, at least same system, so it can be like run on a local, national, regional level, but it should be the same system, so it's easy if necessary to integrate or to communicate or to react if something that's cross-border or transnational happens, right? What are your thoughts on the whole public health union? Is that something that you support as well?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean and in which aspects, because of course I favor very much better coordination when it comes to cross-border health issues. There's also an idea to, when it comes to, for example, strategic autonomy, to ensure that Europe can produce paracetamol and painkillers, and it's not only being produced in China. And I think here it's more efficient if we say, okay, it's an EU aspect instead of all 27 member states needs to be able to produce masks for corona, for example. So I think in that aspect we can think as a European Union. And as well also now we have the blue health insurance card that I think could also be strengthened and being expanded. But I'm not sure if I understand correctly what you mean with having the same systems, because I think there is still like there's part of the municipalities in Denmark where they would favor to have, for example, if you have help from a nurse in your house, that you can choose which services would you want instead of having like a fixed frame. And I think that is very important, that we can also specify it for the specific needs that is that we see in a specific area of a country. And the challenges are still different.
I completely agree in there, and I see that you're a big supporter of the subsidiarity principle, because where the power should be the nearest to the citizen, and that's great. I mean, as far as I know, most federalists who support further integration of Europe are big supporters of subsidiarity. So me as well, but there are some points where subsidiarity simply cannot help us. For example, now we have the war in Ukraine. There is a potential re-election of Trump in USA. So basically we are kind of attacked from two sides. So what should we do in Europe to protect ourselves, right?
Well, I think we should strengthen our foreign policy in Europe. One of the things that the Green Safer Group wants to do is to remove the unanimity when it comes to sanctions, for example, because currently we see that Hungary is always blocking our sanctions against Russia, and trying to blackmail the rest of the EU community in order to get the EU funds that are currently being withheld because of breaches of the rule of law. So I think removing unanimity in the foreign policy area is one aspect. And then I think also when it comes to strategic autonomy, ensuring that Europe can also protect itself militarily more than we can today. Because as you're saying, there is a risk that Trump will be elected. And even if he is not, we also see that US foreign policy is focusing more on China and the Middle East and less on Europe. And that means that we need to take more responsibility as a European Union.
So basically, we could make more progress towards this, let's just say, closer European army, if we are not to say unified European army, but like a more integrated, some sort of defense system on a European level. If we are to not use the term European army, which I know that generates a lot of drama every time people hear it.
Yes, it very much does. For SF, it's very important that the decision to send soldiers into war lies with the national parliament. Of course, there is a big, it makes sense to coordinate even further to make sure that maybe we do some common training, we buy supplies together, we ensure control of the arms export, and I think now in the next parliament we will have to develop a military production in Europe, and here we need a regulatory framework to ensure how are we ensuring transparency of the ownership, that the weapons aren't being exported to a lot of different countries and then ending up in Russia, for example. But for us, the main principle is still that the defense system lies with the member states, and then we can coordinate where it makes sense on a European level, just as we do in NATO.
And the last question for this segment of the Union. Do you feel yourself a bit powerless because you don't have the right to initiate laws in the European Parliament?
On an everyday basis, I would say no. I think what we can do is that we are pressuring the Commission, and a lot of the initiatives that are coming from the European Commission comes on the basis of negotiations with the Parliament and a continuously push. For example, the minimum wage directive was something that left-wing parties in the European Union had been calling for years. And then when we negotiated with von der Leyen, it was one of the demands from the left-wing groups to have this framework directive. In principle, I'm in favor of the right to initiative for the European Parliament, and the Greens EFA group is as well. But I think what we should be aware of is that then we will have a completely different European Parliament, because then we need to have a different civil service or civil servant system in the European Parliament. The committee secretaries needs to be able to do a different type of work, and we need in some way also to make some, not to limit, but in order to make a framework of, I don't think it would make sense if 705 MEPs could just table 10 legislative proposals every day. So we need to make some limits in a way, say, okay, it needs to come from the committees in the European Parliament, it needs to come from a group or something else. But it's the same in Denmark. In practice, the national parliament doesn't have the right to initiative. It lies also with the government when it comes. Maybe in theory it has, but in practice it doesn't. So I wouldn't say it's such a big obstacle, but of course it would strengthen European democracy if we could.
Perfect. I like how you managed to say that we need it, but we are also very good and strong with what we have right now, so we can still make a change for the citizen. And in the end of this segment, we usually have a quiz with 2-3 questions to see how well do you know the European Union project. So I was just wondering, this is not a quiz, this is just a question. Okay. Who is your favorite founding mother of Europe?
Well, I think Jacques Delors is one of the people that I look up to very much because of his continuously push for a more social Europe. So I would say him. If we go very local, I would say Niels Thyssen, who is a Danish economist who was one of the founding fathers of the euro. I think it's of course you always look to who from your national country has been shaping European Union, and there we have quite a good track record that I don't think many people are aware of.
What
and
about
he's
mother?
Currently Niels Thyssen, he's 93 or something, and he's still advising the European Central Bank and traveling from Denmark to Brussels quite often, and I think that's very, very impressive.
That is impressive, but what about the mother?
Well, we don't have that many. We have Simone Weil and Fontaine. I guess that's it.
Because there has been a huge, I remember in the last 2-3 years, there has been a huge attempts to raise more awareness about the founding mothers of the European Union, because they don't get as much, let's just say, space, or they're not talked about as much as the founding fathers. So that's something to reflect upon in the future,
Indeed.
I guess.
Yeah, I could mention too, and I don't necessarily know for what concrete aspects. Like it's mostly because they have buildings named after them in the European institutions.
Yes. Now, actual question: in how many countries in Europe is voting compulsory for the European Parliament elections? We actually have some countries where you get a fine if you don't vote.
I think it's only Belgium, but I think maybe it's a trick question that for the European elections it's not compulsory, but only for national and local.
No, it is actually. Belgium is correct. So you got one, but there's more.
Okay, I didn't know.
Yes, there is also Luxembourg, of course, it's close by to Belgium. You also have Bulgaria, and then you have Greece and Cyprus, which, considering Eurovision, doesn't surprise me that Cyprus does what Greece does. That's just a side comment. How many countries are on the list of potential new EU member states?
It's between.
Can you name some of them? You don't have to know all of them.
Yeah, it's between 7 and 9. So we have Moldova and Ukraine, and then we have Georgia, Montenegro, North Macedonia, I think is also, and Serbia.
Yes.
I don't know if Albania has a candidate status yet.
It is.
It is now. And then I think I'm missing one country from the Western Balkan. Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What is the one country that's waiting for a very long time? For more than 5-6 decades. Yeah, true. But one of them is waiting for like 6 decades now.
That must be Turkey, I think.
Exactly. Yes. They're waiting for a really, really, really long time.
Yes.
But hopefully the Western Balkans, which are also waiting now for more than 20 years, it'll be a bit faster for them, because now with the whole Ukraine, Moldova promises, maybe they will have to let everyone. So we might witness in the next 5 years a new extension of the Europe. What do you think?
I'm not sure it will happen within the next 5 years, but I think it will happen within the next 10 years. And I think it's difficult to say whether it will happen as a block or whether it will be one by one, or maybe two and then one. And I think that's difficult to say. I could imagine that there's an attempt to do it as a block, but it depends also, because if one country is then quite slow in meeting the EU criteria, then it's also like the other countries might get a bit impatient. As you said, Narcis, they've been waiting for a long time, and that may lead to doing it more in steps.
Thank you so much for your answers so far. And we have finished the part 2, the Union, and we move on to part 3, the Citizen. Zoe, you have the word.
But did I win the quiz?
I think you did.
Yes, you win.
You did really well.
Yes, you got all the... I mean, I did confirm the ones were correct anyway, live, so you did well. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Well done for the quiz. No, I'd like to ask you a bit about citizenship and how that... how we can reflect on an EU level about that. So in Denmark, we usually, or probably most countries, we think about Danish citizenship. But how about EU citizenship? Is this something that you think people are aware of? And is it something, that you think about? Like, what is EU citizenship? What does it mean to you, basically?
I think legally it means that I can travel wherever I want in Europe, more or less. And that I can study or work abroad, and that I have certain rights when it comes to social security and the healthcare system, and also to when it comes to protection of rights. So there is a legal part of it where the EU citizenship is very strong. Then on the more identity basis, I think it depends very much which country you are from. I think the feeling of being European is stronger in France and Germany, for example, than it is in Denmark. And I think we still have quite a far way to go in creating this European identity.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that, the natural adherence to kind of our national citizenships is of course more natural since we are, countries, nation states, that are not this kind of weird or unique union that we have. But yeah, and after Brexit, it was a bit interesting that actually there was a discussion about how, what about all the, now former EU citizens, can they retain any of their rights? I mean, even for students such as myself, like things such as Erasmus is now much more harder for British young people. So there's been some talk about like, it's a bit theoretical in the debate. It's not going to happen probably, but can we have some kind of standalone EU citizenship? And there the Court of Justice has also had some thoughts about it. I don't know if you have any reflections on like EU citizenship as a kind of standalone idea, or should it be always attached to our national ones?
Well, I think Denmark has an opt-out on the citizenship, and I think that was because of the fear that you're mentioning, Zoe, that there might be a real EU citizenship. It's not something that I've been thinking about that much. I think it makes sense to a large degree that it's the citizens of the European Union who can obtain an EU citizenship. But we see, of course, also that if people are coming from non-EU countries, that they also get rights, for example, rights to asylum on the basis of EU law. So it's also a compulsory national citizenship because of the EU legislation. So there are some areas where it could make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think what's also interesting is that like EU citizenship, when we think about it, it's like you mentioned, we think about the freedom to travel, to freedom of movement of persons and things and services and money for that sake. But what is interesting is that all these rights are mostly attached to like what we call economically active citizens, right? So either you're studying or you're working, whereas people who kind of fall through the cracks or are not economically active in like the EU legal sense, then actually the rights are much less. But that's maybe just a reflection from my side. But do you think that when people then use this freedom of movement, so you move from one EU member state to another, there's maybe a certain idea that are you then still treated as a kind of foreigner, or are you being seen as part of a European community in that country, or like are you still kind of a foreigner when you come to another EU country, or how do you view that? And what are the debates that you hear?
Well, I think on the first part you mentioned on the active citizenship, I think it's a very important point. I've been working very much on employment legislation, and I think it's also because we have we don't need unanimity when it comes to the labor market. So what we are in practice trying to do is to ensure, for example, LGBTI rights through employment legislation, like saying you have the right to free movement, thus you need to have your marriage recognized, or you have the right to be in a labor market free of discrimination, and then we can do anti-discrimination laws where when it comes to the overall society, it's very we have the anti-discrimination directive that's been blocked now for 10 years because it requires unanimity, because it's not aimed only at the labor market. So it's also a bit the freedom or lack of freedom that the treaties give us as policymakers. And then coming to your question, so you're not just reflecting on your reflection. I think in some countries, or I would say some cities, you are seen as a European and there's a European community. Like I think Brussels, for example. I think also, for example, Budapest is much more European than other parts of Hungary. And And then I think it's also very, like, I think Denmark, I could imagine, is one of the areas where it's most difficult to be a European citizen, because there's so much focus on language requirements in the labor market, and Denmark is also a country that, even though we've had a lot of migration through the years, is quite narrow-minded and quite focused on Danish values and less on European values. So I think the biggest cities is definitely the area like Berlin as well, where you see this European feeling.
Yeah, it's a good reflection. Also, like one on the identity part, but something else is those obstacles. It could be cultural, it could be language, it could be formal requirements in the labor market, in the social and cultural sphere. But thanks so much for that. So we'll go straight to the last part of last segment, which is called. You already spoke a bit about identity, but we'll dive a little bit more into that. Narcis, over to you.
Exactly, and we would like to understand what makes you feel European. When did you first understood that you are a European citizen?
That's a good question. I don't think it was something that I all of a sudden realized in a way. I went to an international school when I was younger, but not like a European school, but a truly international school. So I think it was more like being part of a global community than being part of a European community. Then I think with the EU election in 2019, one of the aims I had was to, also because the Green Left Party of Denmark, SF, is also founded very much in like international solidarity. So here the aim was very much to have like Danish youth realize that the obstacles that Greek youth have are the same, even though not the same in degree, then the same like economically and structural and societal challenges. So I think there I tried to kind of make this European identity stronger, and of course that also impacted myself.
What do you think about the European Union symbols, about the flag, the anthem? Do you have any sort of emotions, feelings towards it?
Yes, very much. I would say sometimes in a very childish way. I think when I'm standing like outside of the European Parliament, and you're looking up on this circle, it's very much like also just EU propaganda, but saying all the things we've achieved in the last quarter, and that always makes me very, very proud. And as well, when I entered in 2019, and shortly after we had to, like I remember my first plenary was playing the anthem, and all of us standing up except for the Brexit party, of course. But here it was also like commonly now we're starting as a European Parliament. And as well also when the Brits left, it was also like some of our closest colleagues who were leaving. And there again, we also had a song and were holding hands. So I think all of these symbols mean quite a lot to me.
Do you think that we should raise the EU flag also in the Danish Parliament during ceremonies, celebrations in the Danish Parliament?
Personally, I would say yes, and as well also on the Europe Day in the municipalities. I think now Copenhagen did it last year, but normally they don't do it.
They don't do it, but they actually, in the past, at least in the past 10 years, it was very common every 9th of May in Aalborg, in my city, that we raised the flag. It's not unfortunately, we found out later it was not a municipality who was doing it, it was an organization. So the moment they stopped doing it, everyone stopped doing it. Okay. So it's a bit sad that we have to depend on associations and organizations to do something that should be normal for the municipality to do it, right?
And I think also like every time I travel, then and I think especially I was traveling through the Balkans last year, and I think it was very like I felt very proud when you could see like that there was these little EU signs saying this train station is funded by the European Union in Montenegro, or this building is funded by the European Union in Naples. I think that is very nice to see always on vacations.
I think, yeah, it's basically a reflection on the whole cohesion funds and how EU money have raised an entire Europe, basically, from one level of, life to another, literally. We will end our fourth part, the identity, with a challenge. And we would like to, if you can, because you must have had a lot of interesting happenings in your life as an MEP, as a very young MEP. So if you could share with us two stories from your political journey, or it can be two beliefs about Europe that you might hold. One, it has to be true, and one, it has to be false. And we have to guess that, well, the true one, I hope.
And it has to be like ideals or things I've experienced, or what exactly?
It can be a small story, a small happening that could have happened to you in your political journey, or it can be some strong belief in something. So it can be
someone like your met, or something fun.
Yes. I discovered I was a European federalist when I was 16, and I fell in love with the green E flag that they had back then. That's an example.
I see now. I should have read.
Or like the first time I read.
Prepared.
No, it could be like, I don't know, like the first time I met Margrethe Vestager, she told me this and that, or like just anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can also test our knowledge in like which files you've had. Like you could say like I had this file and I had this file, and we would have to know if it's true or not.
Okay. I would say then that the first story is that back in 2015, where Denmark had to vote on the judicial opt-out. The opt-out that we have from the asylum system and the Europol and all the judicial things. I was campaigning in favor of removing it. And my other one is that I once had a conservative colleague from a Nordic country who considered moving to the Greens EFA party.
Because of you.
No, both of them are a lie. Okay, I didn't do it that very well.
But it were good stories. It was to get the good stories, so we got those.
But they were believable. To be honest, I thought that the first one was true. I didn't expect you campaign against the opt-out, but yeah.
No, I was 17. I couldn't vote at that time, but I was reading all of these like legislative texts for the referendum, and I moved quite a lot. But in the end, I thought, okay, it's good that we keep this opt-out, and it's one of my biggest regrets for Denmark, because this opt-out is the main reason why we have the possibility to have the Danish refugee and foreign or like foreign citizen policies that we have. And as well, also, we are not part of a lot of the very, very important gender equality legislation that the EU is doing because of this. So it's my biggest regret that I didn't realize that at this point, or back when I was 17, and then joined the campaign to remove it.
And now just a question from me as an international. I'm curious, is your party, the Socialist People's Party in Denmark, are you having a strategy in terms of including internationals in your party, either as members, either encouraging them to vote for you, either encouraging them to candidate for your party, either on local level, regional level, European level? Is there any discussion about it? I mean, we are now, 600,000 people. There will be almost 1 million by 2030. Is there any thought on that?
Not so much, unfortunately. We are very aware at every local election and European election that there is a big group of people who can vote. Like especially in Copenhagen, for example, I think it's around 10% that can't vote for the national elections because they don't have a Danish citizenship, but can vote for the local and the European one. So we are very aware of it. Sometimes it happens that we always forget it when it then comes to the actual campaign. But I think at the local election we did also an English flyer, and I've also said that I want an English flyer for the European election. Now we see if people remember that I've said it. And then I just wanted to say one last thing, that our party is called Green Left. For a long time we didn't have an English name. So people called us, as you also did, Narcis, the socialist or the popular socialist People's Party or something, as it's the direct transfer or translation. But I think we've also realized that, like for many countries, especially in the former Soviet countries, this idea of like socialist people party is something very different than it is in the Scandinavian countries. So in order to translate better what we are on a European level, and to avoid confusions, we then adopted a name. It was a big fight what we should be called in an English language, but in the end we decided on Green Left. Yeah.
So you have an official name, and that is Green Left. We have
an official name, yes,
That's
in our laws, in the statute of the party now.
Goodness. Are the other parties similar? Like, do they also have like a official English name? I never thought of that.
I think actually the left-wing party, Enhedslisten, has it. They are called Left Green. So we are Green Left and they are Left Green. Yeah.
That should be...
To add to the confusion.
Yes. Well, it's not just EU institutions that make you confused. I guess it's also Green Left, Left Green parties in Denmark. Thank you so much, Kira, for taking the time to speak with the international community in Denmark. We hope that you will allocate at least 5% of your campaign resources to target the non-Danish EU citizens living in Denmark.
I hope so too.
Yeah, and it's a big voter group. So there's almost 200,000 non-Danish EU citizens living in Denmark. So and they can join the electoral roll and vote for a candidate at the European Parliament elections in Denmark or in their home country. But of course, it would be great to vote in Denmark if you think it's interesting and follow the candidates here. And there was a recent poll that was conducted in the newsletter last week in Denmark, which is hosting this podcast, and it shows that almost a third was considering to vote for a candidate in Denmark. So that's very promising. So thank you so much, Kira, for joining and taking the time. We really appreciate it. And thank you for everyone who is listening to this podcast. And remember to go register to vote if you're an EU citizen, since it's not something that's kind of automatic. You have to do it at the BOA service. So stay tuned for the next episode of Vote Home, and which is the podcast series that wants you to get out there and vote and have an informed choice. So thank you so much for your time, Kira. See you soon.
Thank you, Zoe. Thank you, Kira. And thank you to everyone that was listening and will be listening until the 9th of June, 2024. See you next time.